This isn't just a personality type, it's a blueprint of the soul. What if I told you that being quiet isn't your flaw, it's your superpower? That all those years you spent wondering why you feel everything so deeply, why crowds drain you, and why small talk feels like torture. It wasn't because something was wrong with you, it was because something rare was waking up within you. You were never too quiet. You were tuned in. You were never awkward. You were absorbing frequencies no one else could feel. Carl Jung didn't call it a disorder. He called it introverted intuition, a deep unconscious wisdom that connects dots others don't even see, a pattern-seeking radar, a soul compass, the mind of a visionary, often misunderstood, but never mistaken. You feel storms before they form. You notice shifts in tone, energy, silence. People call you intense because you don't do shallow. You crave meaning, depth, truth, in a world that's addicted to noise. You're not here to fit in. You're here to see through, to decode, to lead from the inside out. This video isn't just content, it's your reflection, a digital mirror for the rarest minds on Earth. The INFJs, the INTJs, the lone wolves, the pattern readers, the soul watchers. If you've ever felt too different for this world, maybe it's because you weren't meant to belong to it. Let's unlock the 7 hidden signs you're not just introverted, you're an intuitive introvert, through the piercing eyes of Carl Jung himself. Brace yourself, because after this you'll never doubt your depth again. Chapter 1. You don't see the world, you decode it. Most people look. You see, they observe, you decode. While the world gets distracted by the surface, the trends, the noise, the smiles, you're reading the unspoken. You're scanning frequencies they don't even know exist. You walk into a room and the entire vibe hits you like a wave. You can tell who's lying, who's anxious, who's trying too hard to appear strong, but is silently crumbling inside. And no one said a word. Carl Jung called this a magical ability of the mind. Intuition gives outlook and insight. It revels in the garden of magical possibilities. You're not reacting to life. You're reading it like a script written in invisible ink. You spot emotional micro-shifts others miss. You connect dots that don't even look connected on the surface. You're like a psychic, but no incense, no tarot, no act. You don't need signs. You feel the truth. You're a strategist in a world full of reactors, a chess player watching everyone else play checkers. And the best part? You don't need credit, you just know. They think you're quiet. But silence is your superpower, because in that stillness, you're collecting everything. So the next time someone says you overthink too much, just smile, because you're not overthinking. You're seeing the unseen. Chapter 2. Solitude feeds you more than social validation. Let's get something clear once and for all. You're not antisocial. You're not too quiet. And no, you're definitely not boring. You are selectively social. And that's a form of emotional intelligence the world still doesn't fully understand. You don't chase crowds, you crave connection. Not the fake kind, not the forced smiles and surface small talk. You want depth. And if it's not there, you'd rather be alone, unapologetically. Carl Jung once said, the introvert is turned toward the inner world, concerned with the inner psychic processes. And for someone like you, that inner world, it's not a place of loneliness, it's a palace, a creative lab, a sanctuary where ideas are born, visions are built, and the future is mapped out. You don't isolate, you incubate. While others lose themselves in loud rooms, you find yourself in silence. You know how to sit with your own thoughts, to walk through your own mind like a sacred forest. You're not afraid of silence, you trust it, because you've learned that in solitude, you meet the only person who will never leave you, yourself. And that's the difference between you and the rest. They need approval. You need alignment. They seek likes, comments, applause. You seek truth. You could be in a room full of people and still feel alone, because you weren't built for noise. You were built for meaning. So when they say, "Why are you so distant?" you're not being cold. You're just conserving your energy for what matters. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your presence, your solitude. It's not your weakness, it's your sacred weapon. Because in that space, you heal, you create. You remember who you are before the world told you who to be. And in a world obsessed with being seen, heard, and validated, You've mastered the one art they all avoid: being with yourself, fully, completely, unapologetically. Chapter 3. You are both the observer and the architect. You have a strange, rare gift, one that most people will never even recognize, let alone understand. You can step outside yourself, outside your emotions, outside the chaos, and observe it with almost surgical precision. Like a scientist in a glass room watching a storm rage outside, you don't get lost in the storm. You study it, analyze it, understand it. This is your duality. The INFJ becomes the empath, feeling the world's emotions like tidal waves, while the INTJ becomes the strategist, calculating every move with the precision of a chess grandmaster. And Carl Jung had a name for this rare balance of inner mastery: the functional axis, where intuition pairs with either thinking or feeling to create higher perception. It's why you often sound wise beyond your years. Why people come to you for advice, not because you talk the most, but because when you do speak, it lands. You're the quiet one in the room, but everyone feels your presence. Because while they react, you design. You predict. You pre-build outcomes in your mind before anyone else sees the first warning sign. And here's what most people don't get. You're not overanalyzing. You're engineering your reality from the inside out. You're not just living life like a passenger. You're designing it like an architect. Every conversation you replay, every detail you notice, every silence you sit with. It's all data, fuel for your vision. Blueprints for a world you're quietly shaping behind the scenes. That's why you always see 5 steps ahead. Why your silence says more than loud mouths ever could. Why your plans unfold with eerie precision, not by chance, but by choice. You're not impulsive, you're intentional. And in a world full of reactors, that makes you dangerously rare. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to build what doesn't exist yet. To observe deeply, and then create powerfully. You are the watcher and the architect, the one who sees what others don't, and quietly reshapes reality from the shadows. Chapter 4. You feel like an old soul trapped in a fast world. Have you ever walked through this world and felt like everything is moving too fast? But your soul wants to move slower, like people are running from something, but you're searching for something? You scroll through your phone surrounded by millions of voices, but none of them speak the language your heart understands. That's not a glitch in your personality. That's a signal from your soul. You're not too deep. You're not too intense. You're not too quiet. You are an old soul trying to survive in a world that forgot how to feel. You don't chase likes. You chase meaning. You don't care about going viral. You care about vibration. You want real conversations, not rehearsed ones. You want energy that's sacred, not just entertaining. Carl Jung believed in something called the collective unconscious, a deep pool of shared human wisdom, emotion, and archetypes. And some people, like you, are more connected to it. You're not just thinking thoughts, you're channeling truths passed down through generations. That's why you've always felt different. You don't belong to this era's distractions. You belong to something older, wiser, truer. You find meaning in the little things, an old book with cracked pages, a sunset no one else stopped to notice, a lyric that hits you like lightning, a stranger's eyes that feel too familiar. You live in metaphors, you dream in symbols, you cry over things no one else even notices, because your soul sees behind the veil. And here's the wild part. You felt this way since you were young. You always asked questions too big for your age. Why do people lie? Why do I feel everything so much? Why does this world feel hollow? That's not overthinking. That's remembering. Because old souls don't learn the truth. They wake up to it, piece by piece, pain by pain, pattern by pattern. You weren't meant to keep up with this fast world. You were meant to pause it, to interrupt the noise with your presence, to remind people of what they forgot. Love, stillness, depth, awareness. And yes, it's lonely sometimes, because truth-tellers walk alone, because depth intimidates the shallow, because most people are addicted to the surface, while your soul craves the sea floor. But don't shrink to fit them. Don't numb your gift just to blend in. The world doesn't need more people who conform, it needs more souls who remember. So if you've ever been told, you think too much, smile. Because you were never meant to just think, you were meant to awaken. And this chapter, this is your confirmation. You're not weird. You're wired for wisdom. Chapter 5. Your energy is quiet, but magnetic. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to be the loudest in the room. You don't need to post every second of your life to be seen. Because your power, it's felt, not forced. You carry an energy that doesn't beg for attention. But still, when you walk into a room, people notice, not because you're flashy, not because you're trying, but because your presence whispers something louder than words ever could. I see more than I say. And that stillness inside you, that calm, centered, grounded energy, it rattles the insecure, it confuses the fake, it attracts those who are awake. Because real recognizes real. You're not out here peacocking. You're not trying to impress the room. You are the room. You move with quiet conviction. You don't talk just to fill space. When you speak, it lands. You don't perform for attention because your identity isn't for sale. Carl Jung would call this the individuated self, a rare human who has faced their darkness, owned their light, and brought all their parts into harmony. The shadow, the ego, the persona, the soul, integrated, aligned. And when a person reaches that level of inner integration, their energy becomes magnetic. Not everyone can explain why they feel drawn to you. They just do. Because your vibe tells a story of someone who's done the inner work. Someone who's not interested in proving anything, because they already know who they are. You don't gossip. You don't compete. You don't need approval. That's why people trust you with their secrets. Why strangers open up to you without knowing why. Why you feel safe to the healed and dangerous to the manipulative. Your silence speaks. Your gaze pierces. You're calm. It's not passive. It's power under control. You've transcended the need to perform. And in doing so, you've become a mirror. Some people will see peace in you. Others will see everything they're avoiding. But either way, they feel you. Part 9. Because your vibe isn't loud, it's real. And in a world addicted to filters, facades, and fakery, real is the rarest frequency there is. Chapter 6. You crave purpose over popularity. Let's be honest, fame never impressed you. You don't care how many followers someone has. You don't care about the blue check mark, the highlight reel, the influencer title, because none of that speaks to the soul. You've always wanted something deeper, not the spotlight, but the spark that changes lives. Not recognition, but resonance. Not likes, but legacy. While the world chases popularity, you chase purpose. Because deep down, you know, you weren't born to be viral. You were born to be valuable. That's why meaningless trends bore you. That's why you'd rather have one soul-shifting conversation than 1,000 fake interactions. That's why you constantly feel like you're here for something bigger, even if you can't fully describe it yet. The INFJ wants to heal, to listen deeply, to bring peace to chaotic hearts, to leave people better than they were before you met them. The INTJ wants to build, to architect systems, visions, empires, not for applause but for impact, to leave behind something that lasts. And both of them, they don't move from ego, they move from vision. A vision that burns quietly in their chest. A vision that no one else can see, but they feel it every single day. Carl Jung said the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming your truest self, is not just psychological, it's sacred. And if you're reading this thinking, why do I feel like I'm meant for something more? And it's because you are. You were never meant to follow the crowd. You were meant to shift the collective. You were never designed to be understood by everyone, because your mission was never for everyone. You're a visionary, and visionaries are always misunderstood at first. They're too deep for the surface world, too honest for the masked society, too focused for the easily distracted. Your quiet fire, it's not random. It's a compass. It's the divine whisper that says, there's more. Keep going. And you may not have all the answers yet, but the fact that you're still seeking means you haven't given up on your calling. So don't sell your soul for approval. Don't water down your truth to fit in. And don't compare your sacred mission to someone else's popularity contest. Because one day, maybe long after you're gone, someone will pick up something you created, read your words, hear your voice, feel your impact, and everything in them will shift. That is purpose. And that is why you're here. Chapter 7. You predict people. Without trying, you've lost count of how many times you've said it. I knew this would happen. I could just feel something was off. I saw it coming. And every time people shrug it off. They say, "You're just lucky," or "You're overthinking," or "There's no way you could have known." But deep down, you know. You weren't guessing. You were processing. Your brain wasn't sitting idle. It was scanning patterns. Not consciously, not logically, but intuitively. Carl Jung understood this. He believed the unconscious mind was constantly taking in data. Body language, energy shifts, tone changes, micro-expressions, eye movement, the pauses between words. And while most people never notice, you do. Not because you're trying, not because you're reading a manual on human behavior, but because your mind is wired to absorb what others ignore. You walk into a room and instantly feel the tension between two people. You know who's lying, not because they said the wrong thing, but because something in their energy didn't match their words. You can predict someone's next move before they make it, not because you're psychic, but because you've been watching quietly all along. You've been tracking behavior, noticing inconsistencies, logging data, not with notes but with awareness. People call it vibes. You call it truth. Carl Jung explained this ability as a function of the unconscious mind. It works faster than your conscious thoughts. It processes beneath the surface. It knows before you know. That's why you've always felt emotionally exhausted around certain people, even if they smiled, even if they said the right things, because your system picked up on the hidden intent, the manipulation, the jealousy, the mask. You don't try to read people. Your nervous system just does it. Your emotional radar is always on, not because you asked for it, but because that's how you're built. And here's the wild truth. You're rarely wrong, because this isn't magic. It's mastery, a lifetime of watching, of observing, of decoding. While everyone else was focused on the loudest person in the room, you were studying the one who said nothing. You were never meant to be oblivious. You were meant to be aware, not to judge people, but to protect your peace, your purpose, your energy. Because when you see through people, you don't hate them, you just adjust your distance. That's the gift of intuitive introverts like INFJs and INTJs. We don't just listen to words, we listen to truth, and truth doesn't lie. So the next time someone says, "How did you know that?" just smile, because it's not magic, it's not coincidence. It's what happens when your soul pays attention. Chapter 8. You question everything, even yourself. You don't just question life, you question yourself, constantly, relentlessly, silently. You don't walk through life thinking you know it all. You walk through life wondering if you've missed something everyone else has ignored. You're not satisfied with surface answers, because your mind, it doesn't settle, it searches. Who am I really? Beneath the titles, the trauma, the expectations? Why do I feel emotions like tsunamis while others float on the surface? Why do I sense there's something I'm supposed to do in this lifetime, but I can't quite name it yet? These aren't casual thoughts, they're soul storms. And when others dismiss it as overthinking, you know they've never stood in the eye of a storm made entirely of self-awareness. Carl Jung knew this wasn't madness, it was awakening. He believed this kind of internal questioning was the soul's way of pulling you toward individuation, the process of becoming the real you, not the programmed you. You're not lost. You're deconstructing, peeling off years of identity masks, sifting through inherited belief systems, asking questions no one in your bloodline ever had the courage to ask. And yes, it's exhausting, it's lonely, it hurts like hell. But there's beauty in this ache, because while others are numbing themselves with distractions, you're meeting yourself in the raw, unfiltered, unmasked, unapologetically deep. You don't want the kind of peace that comes from ignorance. You want the kind of peace that comes from truth, even if that truth leaves scars, even if it shatters your illusions, even if it forces you to rebuild your identity from the ground up, because you've tasted the emptiness of comfort built on lies. And now, you crave the purity of truth, even if it's bitter. That's why you reflect on things no one talks about. Why am I here? What does it mean to be whole? What am I carrying that isn't even mine? You grieve silently for a version of yourself you never got to be. You carry the weight of past wounds that weren't even your fault. You want clarity so deep. It sets your entire nervous system free, and when the world tells you to move on or be happy, you don't settle, because you know healing doesn't come from suppression. It comes from understanding. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are burning away everything you are not, to reveal the power of who you truly are. And when that transformation completes, you won't just shine. You'll radiate a frequency the world can't ignore. So if you're questioning everything right now, good. That means you're no longer sleepwalking through life, you're waking up. Chapter 9. You've met your shadow, and you didn't run. Most people spend their entire lives running from their darkness. They distract, they numb, they perform, they pretend. Because facing the shadow, that silent, buried part of themselves, is terrifying. But you did the unthinkable. You stopped running. You turned around. You walked right into the storm. And you said, I see you. I'm not afraid anymore. You sat with the version of yourself no one else wanted to see. The parts you were told to hide, the anger you swallowed, the sadness you never voiced, the guilt, the shame, the heartbreak that haunted you in silence. You didn't ignore your pain. You interrogated it. You listened. You cried with it. You bled with it. You asked it, what do you need from me? And you didn't flinch at the answer. That's not weakness. That's warrior-level courage. Carl Jung said it best. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't get to light without first walking through the depths. You don't find peace by pretending you've never been hurt. You find it by healing the wound layer by layer, and that's what you've done. You've sat in silence when the noise was unbearable. You've held space for your inner child when the world told them to grow up. You've faced the fear of abandonment, the ache of not being enough, the coldness of being misunderstood. And instead of collapsing, you transformed. You didn't run from your darkness. You integrated it. You didn't destroy the parts of yourself that were ugly, broken, or scared. You embraced them. Because you knew they weren't your enemy, they were your keys. They were. You walked into your shadow and realized you weren't meant to destroy it. You were meant to become whole. Now when people say you're so calm, so wise, so grounded, they don't realize you earned that peace. You fought for that stillness. You crawled through hell for that clarity. You are not soft, you are sacred, you are steel wrapped in silence, you are light carved from the dark. Because only the brave can be this honest with themselves. Only the healed can hold others without judgment. Only the awakened can say, I am everything I used to be ashamed of, and I love myself anyway. You didn't just survive your shadow, you made it your strength, and that right there, that's not just a chapter. That's your origin story. Chapter 10. You feel other people's pain, like it's your own. You don't just see someone in pain, you absorb it, like it's seeping into your chest, into your bloodstream, into your bones. You don't have to ask what's wrong, you feel it. A subtle shift in their voice, a tension in their eyes, an ache in their silence. While others walk past suffering, you carry it, not by choice, by design. INFJs absorb it like emotional sponges. They take in the pain of others without filters, without shields. It weighs heavy, but they do it anyway. Because healing people feels like purpose. INTJs may not show it the same way, but their empathy runs deep. They analyze pain like a puzzle to solve, strategize, solve, prevent. Whether through emotion or logic, you just can't ignore suffering. You can't turn your back on pain. Not because you're weak, but because you're awake. Carl Jung believed empathy wasn't just an emotional reaction. It was a psychic gateway to something bigger, the collective unconscious. And you? You feel that connection. You cry at things no one else even notices. You feel heavy after being around certain people, not because they said anything, but because your body absorbed their unspoken sadness. You've been called too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But what they don't understand is that your sensitivity is a superpower in disguise. In a world that numbs itself with distractions, you feel. In a world that scrolls past suffering, you pause and notice. In a world that tells people to toughen up, you offer softness. You become the place where others feel seen, heard, held. And yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's heartbreaking. Yes, it sometimes feels like a curse. But you weren't made to escape the pain. You were made to transmute it, to feel it so deeply that it alchemizes into wisdom, compassion, and purpose. You're not fragile. You're finely tuned. You weren't born to be numb. You were born to remember the connection others forgot existed. You don't just hear cries for help. You feel them vibrate through your soul. And maybe that's why you're here. Not to fix everyone, not to carry the world's weight, but to remind people that feeling is not weakness. It's the first step to healing. In the end, the world doesn't need more tough hearts. It needs more tender ones. And that's exactly what you are. Chapter 11. Your imagination is a portal, not a pastime. People think you're zoning out, that you're lost in your head, that you're daydreaming to avoid the world. But what they don't realize is, you're not escaping. You're building. You don't drift into imagination to run from life. You enter it to reshape it, to rewire reality from the inside out, to visit futures that haven't happened yet, and leave breadcrumb trails back to the present. Most people use imagination as a distraction. You use it as a portal. You sit in silence and see things before they exist. You walk through the blueprint of your dream life like it's already real. You feel conversations that haven't happened yet. You hear future versions of yourself, whispering truth through time. That's not fantasy. That's spiritual architecture. Carl Jung knew this power. He explored active imagination, a practice where symbols, dreams, and unconscious imagery weren't just illusions. They were messages from the deeper self, guides, blueprints, inner prophecy. You don't just imagine for fun. You imagine to connect, to create, to communicate with something beyond language. You've lived moments in your mind with more clarity than most people live in reality. You've sat with ideas so vivid, they felt more real than the room around you. And here's the wild part. Those visions, they stick, they haunt you, they guide your actions. You don't just see your dream life, you reverse engineer it, step by step, silently, with intention, with strategy, with soul. It starts in your mind, but you move in alignment. You build in silence and suddenly, your vision begins to materialize. That's not daydreaming. That's divine design. You weren't cursed with a wild imagination. You were blessed with access to the unseen, and yes, it can feel lonely. Because most people don't see what you see, they don't feel what you feel. They think your visions are crazy, until you make them real. But don't shrink your dreams to fit their fear. Don't tone down your mind to fit their limits, because your imagination, it's not just a playground, it's a portal to your purpose. It's how your soul whispers, there's more. So keep dreaming, keep seeing, keep imagining like your life depends on it, because it does. Your vision is already forming in the ether, waiting for you to bring it home. Chapter 12. You were born to lead, quietly, powerfully. You never had to announce your presence. You never needed a stage to feel significant. And you never chased influence because you embodied it without effort. You've been leading long before the world gave you permission. Not with noise, not with dominance, but with depth, because your power has never been about volume. It's been about vibration. While others shouted to be heard, you listened, you observed, you understood. While others demanded control, you mastered yourself. Carl Jung said something revolutionary, that true leadership is born from self-awareness, from confronting your darkness, from facing your shadows and not flinching. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. And that's exactly what you've done. You've walked through emotional fire. You've carried burdens you never spoke of. You've fought battles no one clapped for. And you came out, not arrogant, but awakened. You're not loud, but you're heard. You don't dominate, but you influence. You don't command, but you guide. You don't lead because you want followers. You lead because you've been where they are. You've stood in the chaos. You've questioned your worth. You've rebuilt yourself, not for applause, but for alignment. That's why people come to you when everything falls apart. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're one of the few people who isn't afraid of the truth. Your stillness is rare. Your clarity is earned. Your wisdom is paid for in silence, in solitude, in soul work. You don't motivate with slogans. You inspire with presence. You walk into a room and people feel safer. Not because you fix everything, but because your energy whispers, "I've been to the dark and I came back with the light." That's real leadership. Not about titles, not about status. It's about service. And your life? It's a signal that says, you can rise too. You're not alone. You're not broken. You're being rebuilt. You don't need to perform. You just need to remember who you are. So no matter how many times you've been misunderstood, dismissed, overlooked, remember this. Leaders like you aren't made in boardrooms. They're forged in silence, in pain, in awakening. And the way you carry your calm in chaos? That's leadership. The way you don't try to be liked, but choose to be authentic. That's leadership. The way you hold space for others to rise without shrinking yourself. That's leadership. So walk forward boldly, not with noise, but with knowing. Because the most powerful souls don't lead with a roar, they lead with a whisper. That moves mountains. You are not ordinary. You are oracular. Let's stop watering it down. Let's stop boxing it in. This isn't just a personality type. You're not just an INFJ. You're not just an INTJ. You are something far more rare, more ancient, more sacred. You are a living, breathing map of Jungian genius, a soul blueprint that sees deeper, feels stronger, and moves differently. You don't just look at the world, you decode it. You sense what others miss, you hear what's not being said. You walk through life like a silent oracle, reading energy, patterns, motives, and vibrations. Not for power, but for alignment. You see with your inner eye, you feel with your inner compass. You act not to impress or be, but to remain loyal to your truth. And while most people are scrolling through life, numbing themselves with distractions, chasing validation, wasting their presence, you're sculpting life, one vision at a time, one insight at a time, one aligned move at a time. You don't shout to be seen, you don't hustle to be heard, because you know real power doesn't perform, real power radiates. Carl Jung's work wasn't about labels, it was about liberation. He believed your inner world wasn't just personal, it was archetypal, universal, prophetic. You're not ordinary, you're oracular. Your very existence is a signal that the world desperately needs, a reminder that intuition is intelligence, that sensitivity is strength. That quiet does not mean invisible. That stillness is not weakness, since it's wisdom embodied. You've never fit in because you weren't meant to. You were meant to stand out quietly, to shift atmospheres without making noise, to lead without needing to be followed, to teach without needing a classroom. And this chapter of your life, it's not about proving anything. It's about remembering everything. You are not too sensitive. You are not too intense. You are not too quiet. You are exactly what this world has forgotten how to value and desperately needs to remember. So the next time someone tries to label you, smile, because you know they're not seeing you. They're seeing a reflection of what they've never met before. A seer, a visionary, a quiet storm wrapped in human skin. You are not lost. You are tapped into something deeper. And your path isn't linear, it's luminous. So sculpt on, breathe on, feel on, because this world doesn't need more people performing. It needs more souls who remember how to feel, to see, to lead from within. And that is you. Anchor your intuition. If even one line in this video made you pause, made you feel seen, made you whisper to yourself, "That's me," then know this: you are not alone. You are part of the rare 1%, the silent visionaries, the intuitive architects, the ones who don't just follow the path but feel it, build it, sculpt it from the inside out. You were never meant to blend into the noise. You were meant to walk as a signal of something deeper, something wiser, something timeless. So if your whole life you felt too different, too deep, too quiet, this is your confirmation. You weren't broken, you were intuitive. You weren't weak, you were wired for awareness, and now it's time to own that. Comment below, "I see the world differently," and I'm done apologizing for it. Say it as a declaration. Say it as an affirmation. Say it as your rebirth into truth. Hit like, not for vanity, not for numbers, but to honor the path you've walked in silence, the storms you've survived without applause, the wisdom you've carried without being asked. That click, it's your anchor, your mark, your stand. Subscribe if you're done with surface-level content, if you're tired of shallow advice that doesn't touch the soul, and if you're ready for content that speaks to your depth, to your shadow, to your vision. Because that's what we create here. Not entertainment, but evolution. And share this video with someone who's always felt out of place. Someone who's questioned their sensitivity. Someone who was told they were too much, when really, they were just in tune. Because sometimes, one video, one voice, one mirror, can help someone finally say, I'm not broken, I'm rare. You are not here to explain your soul to those committed to misunderstanding it. You are here to lead, to heal, to remember who you truly are. So anchor that truth, share the signal, and let this be the moment you stopped hiding your inner knowing. This isn't a community, this is a calling. Welcome home.